First, I want to mention that the shir is dedicated in memory of Moshe ben Sana Borg. He lived actually in the neighborhood where I live. He lived across the street from my parents. A very fine person who would come to shul, or never tried to be the center of attention. He was an anav. Very modest person. He always tried to help out the shul with the minyan and with everything. And he's every time I pass by his house, he lived about a block away from me. Every time I remember him and I remember his family. And his yard site was Shabbos. And so I want to dedicate the shir in his memory. Originally, I was going to speak about the Sedra, but because of the incidents that have taken place in the last few days, I think that perhaps it would be a good time to study the next couple shiurim, to focus on the study of the Hagaddah about Pesach, because I think that is very relevant to the situation that we are facing today. Now, after the Kiddush in the Hagaddah, we have the anya. And in the anya, the Hagaddah says, anya, the chalach bar the Mitzrayim. This is the poor bread, or the poor man's bread. The chalach bara the Mitzrayim, that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Kol dichvin yeseh v'yechal, whoever is hungry, let him come and eat. Kol ditzrich yeseh v'yiftach, whoever is in need, let him join us for Pesach. Hashat tahacha, now we are here. Next year we'll be in the land of Israel. L'shana haba barad Yisrael. Hashat ta'avdei, now we are slaves. We in bondage. L'shana haba b'nei chorin, the next year we'll be free. And I've discussed over the years the relevancy of all these different statements. First we say lachma, the chalav asana bar the Mitzrayim, and we say kol dichvin yeseh v'yechal, whoever is hungry, let him come and eat. Kol ditzrich yeseh yiftach, let him come and join us for Pesach. Hashat tahacha, here we're here. What is the connecting link between the all these statements? And I think I mentioned the pshat of the Brisker Rav. Brisker Rav says, and he mentions that the Rambam in his Hagaddah, he starts off the words of the lachma with three other words: Bevehilu yatsu Yisrael mitzrayim. In a rush, did the Jews leave Egypt? Halachmanya da chalav bar mitzrayim. This is the poor man's bread that our ancestors ate in Egypt. Why is it the matzah? There are all kinds of explanations in the Gemara. Why matzah is called the poor man's bread? One of the explanations is that in those days you didn't go to the store to buy the matzah, or bread or whatever. You made it yourself. And the poor man would do it together with his wife. It would be done very, very quickly. And so it symbolizes the idea that the Jewish people were redeemed. They were enslaved for many, many years, but the redemption took place very quickly. And the dough, the matzah that the Jews made in Egypt, they were redeemed so quickly that they didn't have time to let the dough rise. So because of that, the dough, the matzah, symbolizes the quickness of the redemption. So, and that's what it says, according to the Rambam, the Vehilu, in a rush, that our ancestors go out of Egypt. And that's why we eat the matzah, to symbolize how quickly the redemption took place. I mean, I know of a friend of mine, when he mentioned he was giving a hesped, on his mother. And he mentioned that his mother was in a concentration camp, and they already had put her in the gas chamber. But for some reason, they didn't have enough prisoners ready to go into the gas chamber. So they decided that they will put that, when they have more people to go in the gas chamber, they'll put them into the gas chamber. And the next day, and before the next day came, that concentration camp was liberated. Bivahilu, they thought it was the end, it was over. But Bivahilu, Yeshuas Hashem Keherifayin, the salvation of God could come with the twinkling of an eye, momentarily. So the Rambam, the way I think the Brisker Rav and my uncle also, they explain that, in a sense, we're talking here about the present exile that we're in. And we're talking about all the problems, all the threats, all the situations where we are subject to the Ummos Olam, to the nations of the world. And we try to use the Exodus from Egypt as an example of reinforcing our belief that the redemption will come. And so that it could come at any moment. And then we say, Kol dichvin yeseh v'yechol, the Brisker Rav said, we say, whoever is hungry, let him come and join us for Pesach this year. Let us come and eat. Kol ditzrich, whoever is required, yeseh v'yiftach, let him join us for the Korban Pesach. We are issuing two different invitations. We're issuing one invitation for this year. Wherever we are, we can be in Golus. But we say to our fellow Jew, join us for the Pesach holiday. It's our responsibility. It's true. We have a responsibility every day of the year to take care of the needs of those who are hungry, of those who don't have means. But Pesach night, I think there is a special requirement, and I'll get into that. But it's an invitation for everybody to join us. But that's the invitation for now. But there's an invitation called Ditzrich. Whoever is chayev, whoever is required in the Korban Pesach, Let him join us for the Carbon Pesach. There is no Carbon Pesach today. There is no Pesach sacrifice today. But it's an invitation for next year. Next year, we look forward to Mashiach coming. Next year, we're looking for the redemption of the Jewish people. Next year, we see that we're going to we look forward to giving the Pesach sacrifice. So, besides the invitation that we are issuing and expressing for this year, we are expressing an invitation for next year as well. Hashat Tahacha. Now we are here. There's no Carbon Pesach. We're in exile. There's no Beis HaMikdash. The Jewish people are being oppressed. We're not in a position to go up and to sacrifice the Carbon Pesach. Hashat Tahacha. We're here. L'shana haba b'aretz Yisrael. But the situation, we look forward. Doesn't mean it necessarily will happen during this year. But we have to look forward to it happening in the very near future. So, Hashat Tahacha. Now we are here. L'shana haba. But next year, b'aretz Yisrael, we will return to the land of Israel. Hashat Tavdei, we're enslaved. We're limited what we can do. Even the Jews in Eretz Yisrael are limited in what they could do. L'shan haba b'nei chorin. But next year we won't be limited. Next year we're going to be free. This is how the Brisker Rav and explained the Hagaddah. And that seems to be the approach of the Rambam in general, that the Hagaddah, a person has to see himself as if he went out of the land of Egypt now. It's, in a sense, it's not just to study about the past, but it's to look forward to the future. And the events that took place in the over the 2,000 years of our exile, there were always lessons from the Hagaddah. Even though we did not see the full redemption, but we did see the survival of the Jewish people. So the Hagaddah is not just a story about the events of Egypt, but it's a story of every generation. L'shana haba b'aretz Yisrael, hashat ha'avdei l'shana haba b'nei chorin. But we could suggest another pshat, and I have mentioned it many times in the past. Lachma anya the cholav asana bar the Mitzrayim. This is the poor man's bread that our ancestors had in the land of Egypt. It reminds us the bread is a poor bread, doesn't have any ingredients in it. It's it reminds us of poverty, and we remember our state, our situation, our personal situation of the past. There's a story I once heard. It's a good example. There was a certain man. He was very, very poor. And but somehow his situation changed, and he became very rich. But he had fancy clothes, fancy house. He owned lots of property. He was no longer wearing the torn clothes that he previously wore. And he took his torn clothes, and instead of throwing them out in his bedroom, he made a closet. And he took all his torn clothes and hung them up in that closet that was reserved for his torn his torn clothes. Needless to say, his wife was very upset about it. And time again, she would complain about it. What do you need it for? Throw it in the garbage. And time, and he would put her off. Once he didn't like the way she was nagging him about it. He said, I'll tell you the truth. Let me tell you what it is. I look at all my property. I look at my family. I look at the clothes that we all wear. I look at the beautiful house that we live in, the chandeliers, whatever it might be. And I get impressed with whom I am. So I go upstairs to the room. I open up the closet, and I see who I really was. And in a sense, sometimes because of situations that change in our lives, we don't have empathy for those who do not have it as well as we do. And in a sense, the Rambam points out that the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim is not just to talk and know about the redemption from Egypt, but part of the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, of telling over the events that happened to our ancestors in Egypt, and for that matter, that happened throughout the years of our exile. To know about the bondage as well. That we have to, it's not enough. You cannot understand the miracle of the redemption unless we know the problem. And it's very interesting when we look at the parsha of Bikurim. So the parsha Bikurim, which we recite in the Hagaddah, we talk about how the Jewish people came down to Egypt, and how they became big, and how the Jewish people were enslaved, and in a sense, the Egyptians initially feared us, and they enslaved us, and they tormented us. And then, when does the story change? When we cried out to God. Vayishma Hashem es kolenu, God heard our voice. Vayaris anyenu, He saw our distress. Vesamalenu veslachtzenu, our oppression. And so, in other words, the situation changes when we recognize we're in trouble. My uncle would always say that the Machayev of Tefillah is davening, is for a person to recognize that he's in sorrow, for a person to recognize that he's in trouble. And according to many Shitas, there is a requirement to daven every day. A biblical requirement. The Ramban's opinion is there isn't a biblical requirement to daven every day, but there is a rabbinic requirement to daven 3 times a day. But the Ramban says, but if we're in a time of trouble, so then we're required biblically to daven at the time that we're in trouble. And I heard from my father and my uncle, I said that the mitzvah, what is the argument? The Rambam says that you're required to daven every day biblically, because man is always in trouble. Sometimes we don't recognize the trouble. We don't realize we're in trouble. Some people they think that till the very end. But the Rambam's opinion is that since man is always in trouble, he has to daven every day. The Ramban's opinion is it's only when you're aware of the trouble that you're required biblically to daven. And some people have a defense mechanism, and they refuse to recognize that we're in trouble. And sometimes the defense mechanism is of such nature that even when we see others of our community, others of our religion, Jewish brothers and sisters suffering, we dismiss it. That's their problem. That's a problem in the Middle East. That's not a problem in America. And what did we see in this war? What did we see in this war? In this war, we saw that people were protesting, not just against the Jews in Eretz Yisrael who were defending themselves, but they were protesting and interfering with the lives of the Jews in America, many of whom, up to that point, were unconcerned about the Jews of Eretz Yisrael. They didn't identify themselves as Zionists. On the internet, they would say they're anti-Israel, anti-Zionism. Judaism is just a religion, as if they really practiced it. They refuse to recognize the family of Jews. If somebody is a member of a family, you're a member of a family even if you are at the other end of the world. But the concept of the family of the Jews was forgotten. And so long as it didn't affect them personally, and even when it affected them, there are so many that decide to be stupid. There is natural stupidity, and there is stupidity that people assume as a convenience for dealing with the existing situation, psychologically dealing with the existing situation. And unfortunately, during World War II, you had many, many people when one country was invaded, when the Jews in one country were oppressed, there was a certain sense it happened to them. It's not going to happen to us. Yes, we had pogroms and everything. We survived. And when you confront the people with that question, they say, oh, that was different. That situation was different. You know something? When you confronted the people in that situation about past incidents, which admittedly were not the Holocaust, but still were terrible situations, they also said, that situation is different. We don't have to worry. What you have to understand, if they're against one Jew, if not today, tomorrow they're going to be against the other Jew. It spreads like wildfire. When on October 7th, there was demonstrations the next day. And of course, on October 15th, you had stupid rabbis who issued a statement against Israel. Why? Because they weren't threatened. They didn't feel the threat of October 7th. It wasn't their children that were put into the oven. It was someone else's child. They weren't members of their congregation. It didn't affect their salary. It had no effect upon them. And the same thing, it's not something new. When the Jews were being killed, being gassed, being burned, being starved during World War II. Because people don't want to remember the past. We just went through Parsha Zachar. Zachar es asher asalecha Amalek. And you give all kinds of excuses. And you make yourself into a tzaddik. And we look back at these people, World War II. How shameful. I remember as a boy, we had trouble dealing. The youngsters in the 1950s and 1960s, we had trouble understanding where were the Jews of America. But it wasn't okay to them. It bothered us. If there is a wall of shame, then we should make a wall of shame and put the pictures of these rabbis on. Because right now, they could give good excuses. But when the stories will be written later, we should know where responsibility lies. Who stood up for their brothers and sisters? And who stood up for their oppressors? Who tried to deny the Jewish people the right of self-defense? Yes, civilians were killed because the enemies of the Jewish people, they use civilians as shields. And look, Israel, before they go into an area, they send out messages for people to evacuate the area. And very often, the newspapers print pictures of babies who suffered from illnesses who weren't even in Gaza, that came from Gaza. And the Jews are accused of not giving food when we know that the food was being taken by the enemies of the Jewish people, by the Hamas. And I asked at that time if they were able to sneak in guns, if they were able to sneak in weapons of all sorts into Gaza. How is it they weren't able to sneak in food? But it wasn't important to them. They thought they'd be popular. In a sense, they suffer from this complex. They want to identify. They don't want to identify themselves with the Jewish people. They perhaps try to identify with what they think is the Jewish religion, but not with the Jewish people. And but Banitzak El Hashem Elokeinu Avosenu, because people, they don't see themselves. They don't see themselves in sakana. They don't see themselves in danger. They don't see themselves in sorrow, as having trouble. Tefillah, davening, has to come from a sense that I am in trouble. But they don't think that they're in trouble. They're here in the United States, and they looked at the college campuses, and people who are not identified with Zionism, those who are just Jews. And what's interesting is, so, lachma, the cholav v'sona ba'ad Mitzrayim. This is the poor man's bread that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. In other words, we have to remember that we were poor as a nation. We were in dire circumstances. We can identify with those who were in worse circumstances. Maybe to a certain degree, it's not part of our present, even though that's also not true. They just don't realize that they're in trouble. But I can have empathy also, because I went through that also. Kol dichven yese v'yechol. Whoever is hungry, let him come and eat. Kol ditzrich yese v'yiftach. Let it come and join us for the Pesach. Hashata hacha. But more than that, we are also in trouble. We should identify with people who don't have it well. because we are also in trouble. We saw what happened with Shana Haba Barat Yisrael, but next year we'll be in the land of Israel. So on one hand, we are in trouble. We understand the Abdus. We understand the servitude. Perhaps we're not forced to labor as the Jews in Egypt were. But any moment, look who is becoming big in politics. Look what the people on the left are saying. Look at the coalition that is taking place. The coalition between all kinds of movements that would be against each other, but they have one common thread that holds them together, and that is that they're against the Jewish people. And even some Jews who feel that it's in their that they see themselves being important when they demonstrate for the oppressor, when they know, I don't know if they know, but they should know that when people attacked Israel, when people attack the Jews, they are counting on their support to get the United States to limit Israel's self-defense. And so this is, but I think there's another point here. When we invite the poor in to partake of the food of Pesach. Why specifically in Pesach? There's a mitzvah of doing charitable work, helping the oppressed, all year round. Why specifically do we make a special point of Pesach? And the answer, I think, is that Pesach is a holiday of cherus. It's a holiday of freedom, that we feel free. What the Jew has to understand, that to the degree that another Jew doesn't feel free, that to the degree another Jew feels oppressed, that to the degree that another Jew finds himself in danger from the enemies of the Jewish people, the rest of us are not free either. The obligation of freedom is not just that we should feel free, but we cannot consider, because we have to feel free as Jews, not as Americans. Because the Jews in Germany thought they were free because Germany was the open society. Yeah, that was different, they'll say. But so long as any Jew is being oppressed, so that takes away from should take away from our sense of freedom as well. And it's very interesting. There's a custom. Not everybody has that custom, but there is a custom that Pesach at night, each person has another person pour his cup of wine, like Malchus, like a king. I've discussed it. I have many explanations, and there are those that don't have that custom. But I was always wondering about the custom that another person pours the cup of wine for his friend. After all, why should, if I want to feel free, why do I have to become my friend's butler? It just doesn't make sense. We're celebrating freedom by each person pouring the other person's wine instead of pouring his own wine. But in the process, everybody becomes the other person's butler. But the answer is that when you pour wine for the other person, you are expressing that it's your responsibility that the other Jew feel free also. Because that's part of because if the other Jew is not able to feel free, there's something lacking in your freedom. Because Pesach night, our sense of freedom has to come from our recognition of our being Jewish. So when we pour the wine into the other person's cup, we're feeling free. Now, it's interesting, in the Hagaddah, we say, "V'chol dor v'dor, omdim aleinu l'chalasenu." In every generation, and why do we emphasize there? We mention even that Lavan, but in every generation and generation, there are those that rise up to destroy us. And the expression used is b'chol dor v'dor, in every generation and generation. And the question is, what does it mean, b'chol dor v'dor? Why wasn't it enough? Why shouldn't it be enough to say in every generations? In every generation. B'chol dor. Why b'chol dor v'dor? In every generation and generation. Just in every generation, that would have been enough. But I always mention, because so you have certain generations and you have certain situations where those who are oppressing the Jews, those who demonstrate against the Jewish people, they want to absolve themselves from this feeling that they are anti-Semitic. No, it's not that we're anti-Semites. We're anti-Zionist. We're anti-communist. We're anti-capitalist. And when the group is anti-Zionist, so they oppress the Jew because the Jew is a Zionist. And there are foolish Jews. I shouldn't even say foolish. There are Jews that are thinking about the moment instead of thinking long term. And they'll also be anti-Zionist. And they'll scream, as one lady in the president's committee, you say, no, the president got rid of her. But do not identify anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. And she screamed it out loud. And what did we see? And she said it just after how long ago was the riots in Columbia University? Jewish students who had nothing to do with Zionism were attacked. were prevented from going to class. Did these rabbis come out with a statement about that? Sometimes at the end, we are opposed to attacking the Jewish people also. After a whole page of attacking the Jewish people to self-defense, we don't agree with certain things that were done. Gam charvona zocher latov. Put it at the end. That also wasn't nice. But who are they demonstrating against? They were demonstrating against the Jewish people. That was a cover story. They identify more with the enemies of the Jewish people. Did they demonstrate after October 7th? October 15th, they already put out a statement against the Jewish people. And I'm not saying just against Sahal. The statement they put out was against the Jewish people. They'll claim it wasn't against the Jewish people. They're ignoring what they saw themselves. Where were they? Where were all these people when Iran killed 30, 40,000 of its own people? And of course, they blame Israel for the starvation in Gaza because of the food that the Hamas took away. My question is, and Israel sent in food, and of course it was taken away. There were pictures on television about it. And they're not demonstrating against the people that are being killed through starvation and all kinds of other means in Africa. President Trump came out strongly about it. But where are these people? Where are they? So what is it? It's clearly anti-Semitism. In every generation and generation. In other words, one generation has a tendency towards communism. Another generation has a tendency towards capitalism. Another generation is anti-Zionist. Whatever it is, it will always be the Jewish fault. Whether if it's a generation of cap that has a tendency, and today it could be in the same generation, a community that is socialistically oriented will be against the Jew because the Jew is a capitalist. And some of the stupid Jewish capitalists will give them money, forgetting the lesson of World War II. And in some cases, their parents might have been capos also. So then they're keeping up the tradition of their family. And in the other cases, these Jews are ashamed to their ancestors. And if it's a community or a generation that had a tendency to communism, the Jews will be considered capitalists. Whatever it is, if it's whatever the issue might be, it will always be, they will identify the Jew on the other side. And that's what we see. What do we see? Who are these people coming and attacking? Who are they attacking? First of all, they're not limiting it to Israel. They're attacking Jews all over the world. They're attacking Jews in the United States. You find last week a Reformed temple was attacked. Today, there were bombs falling on the Bnei Brak, hardly to be associated. Okay, it's Israel, but hardly to be associated with a tendency towards Zionism. What does that show us? It shows us that these people are against all Jews. It doesn't make a difference. They'll let you march in the front and smile while you're marching together with them. They'll let you sign papers against the state of Israel. But when your children and your grandchildren go to the college campuses, they will be attacked. Our answer is, we have to understand, when one Jew is not free, when one Jew is being oppressed, all Jews are being oppressed. That is part of the holiday of Pesach. Pesach is the holiday of freedom. If there's a Jew outside that doesn't have a Seder to attend, if there's a Jew outside who's being oppressed, you should know it's against all the Jewish people. Even, and this is something that I notice, sometimes you have a Jew who did something wrong, and he stands in front of the court, and the judge will give him a severe sentence, much more severe than he will give a non-Jew. That's also anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is with every Jew. I'm not talking about the person justifying what the person might have done. I'm not talking about that. But you have to understand, anti-Semitism is if you use action against the Jew because he's a Jew. So even if a Jewish prisoner who was put in for legitimate reasons in prison, but if he gets a more severe sentence, if he's not treated properly, if other religious people in the prison have the rights to observe their religion, and the Jew is limited in his observance of his religion, that is anti-Semitism also. It may begin in the prison, but it goes outside of the prison also. When one Jew is under attack, then all Jews are under attack. When one Jew is mistreated, then all Jews are being mistreated. We do not fulfill cherus unless we try to make every Jew feel cherus. This is so Pesach at the Seder. We want to demonstrate. We're sitting at the Seder. We sit with our family. We feel cherus. We feel joy. And the interesting thing is, at the Seder, from a memory standpoint, you sit there not just with your family, but with your ancestors as well. People think about their parents, their grandparents, when they sit at the Seder. They're all there. But we have to remember what happened to those previous generations. We have to learn the lesson of history. And the lesson of history is that Every time there was an attack on one group of Jews, it was an attack on all kinds of Jews. It was covered up. And there are those who want to feel comfortable. So they'll say it's for this reason, it's for that reason, it doesn't apply. It, it's the same thing. We're not free unless all Jews are free. Okay.
If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. Okay, there's nothing in the chat.
Okay. Okay.
Have a good week.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay. Come on.